One of the biggest complaints I heard about were iPods in the workplace. Managers find it very, very frustrating to see their workers plugged in with their earbuds to iPhones or iPods or iPhones while they're doing their work. And it seemed to be a real source of conflicts. It might seem like a minor issue, but for this generation, they really want their iPods, even if they're working. And I see it with my own son, who's a 16-year-old high school student. Sometimes he and his mother go to battle because he says he works better with his iPod, and she can't believe that. So it's a battle of wills at times. As far as jeans on Wall Street, that generally would not be allowed. In fact, is not allowed. But there was a young woman at one of the banks I interviewed who said, I would pay $20 a day if they would let me wear blue jeans to work every day. So this generation wants to be themselves. They want to be casual. Their sort of trademark is jeans and flip-flops, and obviously in most workplaces that isn't acceptable. Now, one interesting case was Capital One Financial, which is a growing financial services company in America. They will actually allow their employees to wear shorts to work if they're not in a client-facing situation. In other words, if they work in an office where they're only with their colleagues, which I found unusual. But there are some attempts by companies, even KPMG, the big accounting firm, they're very much trying to reach the millennial generation, and they have a magazine aimed at millennials that they publish periodically. And they had a guide in there to how to dress on casual work days. And they didn't allow ripped jeans, things like that, but they felt that they had to tell this generation what was appropriate and what wasn't, even on casual days. Now, when I was speaking out in Los Angeles last February to a company in the construction industry, afterwards a woman came up to me and said, I have a good story for you. She said, one of my employees came to me and said, you're going to have to let me leave twice a day so I can go home to walk my dog. And the manager said, well, that won't always be possible. You can't count on that every day of the week. And so she said, then I'm quitting. My job is interfering with my life. So again, it's all about balance for this generation. Now, I talked earlier about the trophy kids. Well, because this generation has received a lot of positive reinforcement, and much of it justifiable, they really expect to get a lot of pats on the back. Some people I interviewed called them praise junkies. At Dartmouth College, which is one of the Ivy League universities in America, I interviewed a French professor, and she said, I've always had a reputation as being a tough grader, so everybody in my class should know that before they enroll. But she said some of the young students she's seeing now get really upset because she doesn't make more positive comments on their papers. So she said one young woman came into her class and said, I really think you should be nicer to us. And she said, I'm going to give you this. So she gave her a stamp with a smiley face on it and said, I think you should stamp smiley faces on our papers if you like something. So anyway, it is a generation that thrives on praise. They also like a lot of directions and guidance. Managers often tell me that even though they're very smart, they seem to need a roadmap to a project, that they can't figure things out easily on their own. At a major pharmaceutical company in America, one young man didn't finish his project on time. His manager asked why. His response, you forgot to remind me. So they really do need a lot of guidance. And in America, in my book, I write a bit about this, and again, it may not be applicable here, but in America, schools have gotten to the point, I'm talking about elementary and high schools, where when you have an assignment, say write a paper on this book, they give you a very detailed guide to what they want. You know, we want it to have a variety of parts of the text cited in the paper. We want to have this dealt with and that dealt with. And they'll actually even say how many points they're giving for different parts of the paper. So I think this generation has become used to getting an awful lot of very detailed instruction. And when they get to the workplace, managers don't have time to provide all that. And they're finding this generation almost pesky because they keep coming back for more help on projects that they should be able to figure out on their own. And I think the worrisome part of all this is that they aren't comfortable with risk and making independent decisions. Some of the people I've interviewed at universities say they think it's partly because they're afraid to make mistakes, so they don't want to make the wrong choice. For example, if they have 2 job offers, they often have a very difficult time making the choice, and they come to the career services director and ask for guidance. Which company do you think I should go with? And again, they think it's because they don't want to make the wrong choice, even though it's not a choice they can't change later. They're very, very used to having people give them advice, whether it be parents, teachers, or their fellow students. And in the workplace, consulting firms, financial services companies, and others say they find this generation has a lower tolerance for ambiguity, that, again, if there's a problem they have to deal with, it's in the gray area, that there's not a clear answer one way or the other, that they find this generation struggles more to solve the problem. And one of my theories is that there's been almost too much teamwork in schools in America, at least, that they're used to having collaboration, working as a group, and that because of that, to make decisions on their own is almost a new experience. And as I said earlier, the most positive attribute, I think, for this generation is their commitment to make the world a better place. I think they have a really ingrained sense of civic duty, and that they want that to cross over into the workplace. I interviewed a young woman at the University of California at Berkeley. She had gone back there for her MBA degree, and she said she had worked at one of the big investment banks on Wall Street, and she finally decided that all she was doing was making rich people richer. And she said that just wasn't fulfilling for her. So what she did was she didn't drop out of the business world. She went back to business school and got a degree that focused on social and corporate responsibility issues, which is an area that Berkeley is very strong in. And so she ended up going to work for a utility company working in their renewable energy department. And she said she felt much happier, again, because she felt that her work had meaning for society, not just for the company itself. Now, there's been a trend since the beginning of this decade for business schools to offer more courses that deal with social responsibility and the role of business ethics. Also more social entrepreneurship programs where people start a business that, again, has a social purpose to it. And in America, there's an organization called Teach for America that has become a very formidable force on college campuses. In fact, some of the major recruiters, the banks and consulting firms, found that their toughest competition wasn't other banks and consulting firms, it was Teach for America. That so many young people wanted to go off and teach for 2 years in what we would call an inner city school, a school that wasn't doing well, that had a lot of poor, underprivileged children. And what companies have done in America, at least some of the major ones like Google and JP Morgan Chase, is they've created partnerships with Teach for America so that if they hire you, you can go off for 2 years and do your teaching, and then you join the company after that, which I think is a great arrangement. I think more employers are trying to provide community service opportunities in the workplace, whether it be just 1 day a year where everybody does volunteer work, or longer-term sabbaticals where they let their employees go off and work for a nonprofit organization or even go to a developing country and work. Now, some of the more cynical people I interviewed for my book said, is all this a passing fad? In other words, once these young people have jobs, mortgages, families to take care of, will they still have the time and commitment to do some of these good deeds? And it is an open question, because most of this generation still remains single without all these responsibilities. But I got the feeling from interviewing so many young people that it won't be a passing fad. Maybe they won't be able to give as much time to philanthropy and other good works, but I think they will really feel that it's their responsibility to be an active participant, whether it means voting in elections or doing volunteer work for a nonprofit when they have the time. So I do think it's an ingrained quality for this generation.